Okay, everybody. Well, I've got the honor of introducing Senator Mike Rounds, my senator here from South Dakota. And as I speak too often, there's a lot of different perspectives that we have to appreciate, and I think I can appreciate that the senator is introduced to a lot of different perspectives, but most importantly is he hears ours. He acts on our behalf almost all the time. I'm not going anywhere with that. I'm just saying that it's so good that he hears us and he keeps communication open. We've worked together on issues like the Rounds-Smith letter that dealt with concentration, and I'll never forget sending that letter to Bill. Bill said, "This is awesome. This is like we wrote it, only it's written better." And I know that I said that last year, but you don't hear Bill Bullard say that very often. Another great thing that he's done is he's been instrumental in getting MCOOL front and center in the Farm Bill. Senator Rounds is not on the Ag Committee, but his constituents are Ag constituents, and he makes great efforts on that behalf. So I'd like to welcome my Senator Mike Rounds.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. Well, I guess it's still morning here, so I'm going to begin by just saying good morning. I want to thank you for the opportunity to basically just talk with you for just a few minutes today, specifically with regard to some of the issues that I think you've got an interest in. Let me just begin with one real quick message. I think, matter of fact, I'm convinced you'll agree with me, the time has come for mandatory country of origin labeling, period, end of story. Now, it's not there yet. We got some work to do. As many of you know, the Farm Bill is set to expire next month. The Senate and the House Ag Committees are currently working on drafting the Farm Bill. We don't expect it to be done on time. By that I mean September 30th, but we are hopeful to have a new Farm Bill by the end of the year. Now, while I'm not on the committee, I am continuing to push for the mandatory country of origin labeling to be included in the Farm Bill. This would be an important step in restoring market integrity for consumers and cattle producers. For too long, the packers have skewed this market in their favor. Now we want to take it back. For the last 3 years, I've said that consumers will need to drive and help carry this policy debate. The 9 major cattle producing states, we simply can't get it done alone. There's only 9 states in the entire country where cattle outnumber people. And that means if 2 senators per state, that's only 18 senators, and you got to have 60 in order to get anything done. So what we've been working on and what we need your help to do is to go after and to share with consumers how critical it is that they get good information with regard to where their products are coming from. So the consumer is critical in winning this discussion. Like it or not, the House and the Senate committees and the Farm Bill are not primarily focused on our farmers and ranchers. Over 75% of the spending is focused on consumers. Let me just give you an example of what I mean. We're expecting that this Farm Bill, it doesn't appropriate money. What it does is it authorizes the appropriators to appropriate money because it authorizes the legislation that they then fund. We're expecting, though, that the cost of the Farm Bill that they're talking about that will be for the next 5 years, they have to project what the cost is out over 10 years. They're expecting that the Farm Bill will run about $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. 1.2 of the 1.5 trillion goes into nutrition. We used to call it the old food stamp bill. It's now called SNAP. That's the reason why on the Ag committees, you've got a whole bunch of people that aren't necessarily from Ag states, but that have got a real interest in the Ag bill. It's because this is one of the major issues for them in those urban areas. Now, the majority of the members on the Senate and the House Ag committees, including the chairs, that's the House Ag ranking member is from Atlanta. Not a lot of cows in Atlanta. They don't come from what we consider to be cattle country or farm states. Instead, they come from states where consumers vastly outnumber the producers. That's why it is important that we continue to share our message with consumers and let them know the negative impacts of packer concentration. Now, we can't win this unless we get 60 votes to include our proposals in the House bill and in the Senate bill. In the Senate side, we gotta have 60 votes out of 100. In the House, they only need a majority. But then you bring the two of them together in a conference committee before the end of December. And if we've got MCOOL mentioned in both of them, there's a really good shot at actually getting them included in the final bill. What are we trying to do with it, and why would this be successful? Well, in the past, what we've done is said we're gonna just make it a law that we're gonna have mandatory country of origin labeling. Then Canada and Mexico, they sue us because that's not part of the trade agreement that we'd already entered into, and they win when the WTO steps in. So what we've done this time is we've said this is directing our trade representatives that they will include this MCOOL in the trade negotiations, and we give them a timeline for actually getting it done. If it didn't matter, Canada and Mexico wouldn't care if we included it. It does matter. And that's the reason why it's been such a bloody battle with those two countries is they understand that the American consumer does want to know where their beef is coming from. And that's the reason why this has taken time to get it done, because Canada and Mexico really don't want that. Our challenge is to get enough consumers to understand how critical it is that they know where their food comes from. So, all I ask from you today is please, if you got friends and family in other states that maybe aren't even ag states, let them go to their House members and their Senate members and say, when this comes up, this is really important because as a consumer, I want to know where my food is coming from. Why shouldn't I be told the same thing? And if we can get those consumers on board, we're going to win this battle. Now, let me talk a little bit about Brazilian beef. South Dakota ranch families work tirelessly to produce the safest, highest quality, and most affordable beef in the world. Producers' livelihoods are being compromised by Brazilian beef imports that fail to meet our country's food safety and animal health standards, as Brazil has a history of failing to report in a timely and accurate manner diseases found within their herds. This poses a significant threat to both American producers and consumers. Once again, we talk consumers. This is important. Consumers should be able to confidently feed their families beef that has met the rigorous standards required in the United States. I've introduced bipartisan legislation with Senator Jon Tester from Montana that would make certain that Brazilian beef is safe to transport and eat before it is brought into our markets, neutralizing Brazil's deceptive trade practices. We first introduced the bill in November of 2021 after Brazil revealed 2 cases of atypical bovine spongiform, BSE, or some folks call it mad cow, that last June, the previous last June. Most countries report similar cases to the World Organization of Animal Health, OIE, immediately upon its discovery, with both the United Kingdom and Germany reporting cases to OIE within days of their occurrence that same year. But Brazil reported its cases more than 2 months after the fact, breaking trust with the OIE and their other global trading partners. This has been a routine occurrence, with Brazil also waiting months or even years to report similar cases in 2012, 2014, and 2019. Brazil enjoys a preferential market access to the global stage due to its designation as a negligible risk exporter by OIE. While rare, one-off instances of atypical BSE do not necessarily indicate systemic issues with the health of the Brazilian cattle herds. Repeatedly delays in reporting suggest an overly lax food safety regime and raise concerns about the reporting of additional dangerous diseases such as foot and mouth disease, African swine flu, and avian influenza. Our legislation would make certain that Brazilian beef is safe to eat before it is brought back into the U.S. markets by imposing a moratorium on Brazilian beef until a group of food safety, animal health, and trade experts has made a recommendation regarding its import status. Now, with regard to ownership of American farmland by other folks, while there's a lot to complain about in Washington, I guess I want to have a discussion with you about something that I think we've had a couple of wins on. China and Russia are our near-peer adversaries, and North Korea and Iran are no friends to the United States. These four adversaries view America as their top competitor and only wish to gain advantage and opportunities to surveil our nation's capabilities and our resources. We've led a congressional effort on this particular issue by introducing legislation in 2022 that would ban these four countries from purchasing American farmland. Our efforts received wide support from ag groups, RCAF, and all the ag groups in South Dakota. This year, I'm proud to say that we were successful in including this legislation as an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. Huge bipartisan support, over 90 out of 100 votes in the United States, 91-7 as a matter of fact, in the United States Senate to include that. So it's a huge bipartisan victory for us. This common sense provision will make our homeland more secure. Here's what the deal is. Many of you know that in North Dakota last year, there was a company associated with the government of China. They wanted to buy a location just a few miles away from an air base, and they wanted to put in a corn wet milling plant. Big facility, plenty of room in there for all sorts of listening devices and communications capabilities, and also a base from which to learn more about that particular air base. This particular air base that they had focused on was very sensitive with regard to specific types of communications. When we went back to look to find out just exactly what was going on with this, what we discovered is we really didn't have the best laws in the world to be able to limit them, in this particular case, on ag land. We went a little bit farther in our legislation and said not only should they not be allowed to buy ag land, but they should not be allowed to buy ag businesses as well, if it's associated with one of those four governments. Seems to me that it's only common sense. We did provide, so that for those of you that have an interest in knowing about this, we did provide that if they already have a location somewhere, such as Smithfield, as an example, where they've got a Sioux Falls facility, where if they want to buy some land around their place and so forth, they can do that in an urban area. So if they need some more parking spaces, they need some room to develop or to expand their business, they can do that, but they can't do it in a rural area without getting approval. The approval would have to come from the President of the United States or their designee. And this would also be investigated by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. It's called CFIUS, that already exists. But once again, we would then also include with our legislation that the Secretary of Ag, for the first time, would be a non-voting member of the CFIUS committee in the future as well. I just think that makes sense. So I just want to share with you, I think we're moving in the right direction on that, and I think our national security is well served with this particular provision. One last item I just want to touch base on just very briefly. For a number of years, we've been calling on the USDA to take action to stop foreign beef from receiving the product of the USA label. Well, our work is finally paying off. You know, since probably 2001 or 2002, USDA has allowed foreign meat products, including poultry and also eggs and so forth, if it's repackaged to come into the United States, they could put voluntarily a product of the USA sticker on that product. You talk about false advertising. Well, we've put into law, we actually created legislation that would stop it from being allowed as a voluntary label unless it was born in the U.S., it was fed in the U.S., and it was processed in the U.S. Talking to the Secretary of Ag, they have now, since they've seen this legislation, they are voluntarily changing that rule, and they are now going to mirror what we had within our legislation. So I think we've won one, but you know, other administrations might change their mind, so we're still pushing to include this product of the USA labeling within the Farm Bill this year, and we would most certainly appreciate your support for that. We think we can get that into the Farm Bill because we can't find anybody who's disagreeing with us on it. We think it's just a matter that the bureaucracy is slow to move, and we think that this is the correct approach. Is if If you're gonna put a voluntary label on it, let's have the truth in advertising that consumers deserve. I think this is a step in the right direction, and once again, I just want to say thanks to Tom Vilsack, who's the Secretary of Ag, because he is doing this voluntarily right now, but I think we ought to have it in law to make it clear that it doesn't happen. Finally, I just say thanks, appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today. I didn't want to take up all the time. I hope I'm not overtime on it. Do I have any time left at all? Okay, do I have 5 minutes?
Yep.
Okay, I got 5 minutes. Let me do it. Any questions? If not, I'll get off.
Right over here.
Okay, the last time that we had Cool, it came through the Farm Bill, and it sat there for a long time and was not funded. What do you have in place now for the Cool bill, or the Cool going into the Farm Bill, that would get that thing funded and off the ground?
Yeah, well, once again, the Farm Bill doesn't fund anything. What it does is it's the authorization for it. And so this will be authorized the same as all of the rest of the Farm Bill programs will be authorized. You still have to work your way through an appropriations process. But in this particular case, mandatory country of origin labeling is a rule. It is basically a program that gets put into, if we're successful, will be put into our trade agreements. So our trade agreements, we protect that through our laws, but the laws that we had in place before, that we couldn't do it because we didn't have them in the trade agreement. This fixes that in the authorization language that basically says you have to include it in our trade agreements as you renegotiate those. And it's the only way we're going to get it done. But it's not so much a matter of funding it in the Farm Bill. You authorize it in the Farm Bill, and then the appropriations itself will be another step.
So if that does get through the trade agreement, then is there anything you can do to see to it that that gets top priority for funding?
I can't say top priority for funding, but I can say that it would be funded the same as the protections for our other items that are found within those trade agreements.
Okay.
Okay, one more from Vaughn over here.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do for us, Senator. We really appreciate it. I'm Vaughn Meyer with the South Dakota Stock Growers. And I have kind of two questions, I guess, as you went on there. The first one would be, Representative Johnson has put a bill in similar or running parallel, I guess, to you. Is that going to complement your bill or bringing more attention to it on there? And the second one, quick, I'll give you this and then I'll sit down, is foreign ownership. We've been working with that here in South Dakota too, and it seems like we're just going after our enemies and stuff like that. Why can't we do all foreign ownership? Most other countries don't sell to any foreigners, whether friends or enemies, and sometimes friends today are enemies tomorrow. So thank you.
No, yeah, Representative Dusty Johnson has got a provision, and his was just introduced. I talked to Dusty about it over the last couple of days. His is not one that it is slightly different from ours, but the key to his and ours both is to get something on mandatory country of origin of labeling in both the House bill and in the Senate bill. Then when the conference committee comes together, you got a much higher percentage of getting it actually addressed within the end conference committee report. So the fact that he's got one that he's working on over there right now is really good news. The differences between us, we give them a limited amount of time in which to get it done. His doesn't have that same time limit on it. So it's a little bit lighter than ours, but nonetheless, the fact that it's in there is a really critical step, because if we didn't have it, if we didn't have anything at all on the House side of it, it would be much more difficult to get it included in the end conference committee report. But the fact that the House and the Senate both address it means we got a lot better chance of getting it in the final version. The other piece on that is within the bill, I didn't really go into it here, but in our provisions included within the NDAA is a provision that says if you are a foreign person and you want to buy farmland in the United States, if it is over 320 acres, then you have to get approval as well. under 320 acres be more difficult just because there are folks from outside that buy smaller packs. But if it's over 320 acres, this provision also addresses those other countries as well. Not a complete prohibition like we've got for those 4 challenging ones, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. But for other countries, if you're over 320 acres, this bill addresses that as well. With that, hey, look, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. Wish you the best, and let's just hope it continues to rain. Thanks.